So sin number two, this is one that this comes from before my time. So that 5%, that 30% rule that you talked about a little bit earlier, but I'm curious to learn more what your knowledge of this is.
Yeah. So those were some of the settings that early on the internet people talked about, in the documentation talked about. That's the settings of when you're rebuilding or when you're reorganizing. And and I think it was at 5% fragmentation, you should be reorganizing, and at 30%, you should be rebuilding. Well, the reality is that triggers things way too often. And ignoring that external fragmentation rarely matters anymore. And basically, this leads to what we consider like death by defragmentation. So, where we usually go with this is we defragment less often, but we focus on rebuilding statistics more often. If you're looking at SSD or SAN storage today, your IO is so much faster that if you got to bring in a couple extra pages to be able to service a query or load an index or whatever it may be, then usually that's not going to make that big of a deal. But if you're so fragmented that you've got to bring in twice as many pages, well, yeah, maybe that's worth considering, worth rebuilding. So usually we go with much lower levels than that. And depending on the environment, we set it up so that we're not going to rebuild and reorganize for hours on end when we do that. Usually I will consider that if a table is more than 80% fragmented, I will consider doing a rebuild. If it's less than 80% fragmented and more than 30% fragmented, I'll consider doing a reorg on it. And of course, this may vary slightly depending on whether you're standard or enterprise edition, but kind of that's general rule there. And then if it's less than 30% fragmentation, I don't really care because it's not going to make that big of a difference overall in the performance of how your indexes or your tables are working there. Now, with that, I think we'll get to in a minute is statistics. I want to make sure on these comments I've made here, I'm just talking about defragmenting or rebuilding indexes, not talking about statistics necessarily yet. Thanks for watching. I'm Steve, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you like it, please click the thumbs up icon. And if you want to subscribe, click subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon to get notified when we have new videos. All right, have a great day.